Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm giving an honest review of the Canon R6 Mark II. I'm talking about a whole bunch of technical specifications of this camera body, as well as the creative uses I like to use it for and just how I've used it in my business and just what I think in general of this camera body. So let's get right into talking about this camera body. Number one, the weight of the Canon R6 Mark II is 23.99 ounces, and that weight is including the battery. I don't think it's including the two SD cards in the slot, but it's including the battery again. So 23.99 ounces. What I like about the weight of this is that it's a lot lighter than most other camera bodies, and that's because it's a mirrorless camera body. So basically it doesn't have all the mechanical, like moving physical parts inside. It just doesn't have that. In fact, what I'll do is, so I actually have an adapter on this right now so I can put my EF mount lens onto an RF mount camera body. So I have this is a EF mount to RF mount adapter, which you can also purchase this on Amazon. I'll link it down below. So that's how I'm able to, use my EF lenses on my RF mount camera body, the R6 Mark II. And I just wanted to show you. So this is what the inside of the Canon R6 Mark II looks like. It's digital, it's not physical. It does not have the mirrors inside. It's mirrorless. So that's what it looks like. Number two is what are the technical specifications of the Canon R6 Mark II. Now, there are a ton of tech specs of this camera body, so I'm just going to go through a few that I know about and found out about. So first of all, it has a high image quality featuring a new 24 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor. So 24.2 megapixels. This is lower megapixels that I like. It still seems to work for what I'm shooting with, and so it seems to be fine. I don't think it's an issue, but it is lower than the 30.4 megapixel that the Canon 5D Mark IV has. It also has a Digit X image processor with an ISO range of 100 to 102,400, so that's a really amazing ISO range. And then it has a raw burst mode and pre-shooting captures up to approximately 30 frames per second, which is pretty cool. It also has automatic subject detection of people, animals, and vehicles. So this is where I think that the Canon R6 Mark II is, wowing people. I've heard a lot about, autofocus capabilities is so amazing and things like that. And so that's where I think that it shines. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm still kind of using like the autofocus, kind of like the same as I did with the Canon 5D Mark IV. I have not fully explored the autofocus of this camera body to its fullest extent yet, I will admit that. However, I can also see that the autofocus of the R6 Mark II is already better than the 5D Mark IV. So that is a huge win with this body. A huge bonus, perk, whatever, of this camera body is that so you can film in 4K, when you're like recording or doing video production, but you can actually record up to 60 frames per second. And this was not possible on the 5D Mark IV. On the 5D Mark IV, you could only do 4K in like 30 frames per second. On R6 Mark II, you can do 4K video recording up to 60 frames per second, which is huge because this means that, like if you do wedding videos, you can film 4K wedding videos using 60 frames per second. I know that some wedding videographers do prefer to shoot 120 frames per second because you can like really slow things down and make it look like super dramatic. So I do think that there are other camera bodies out there that might work better for you if you're like super dramatically into video production for wedding videography. But because this channel is mainly geared towards wedding photography, only with a little bit of video production stuff dabbled in, but not very much, this camera is an amazing wedding photography camera for photographers. It also has in-body image stabilization with up to 8 stops of shake correction with coordinated control image stabilization. Basically just has really good image stabilization, which is a huge perk. All right, this is super cool. It has a UVC/UAC compatibility, which allows use of a web camera and stream, like a live stream in full HD. So that means that you can live stream or like use this camera as like a web camera in full HD, which is pretty cool if you want to use it like that. So definitely a huge perk of this camera body. Number three is what are the uses of the Canon R6 Mark II? Obviously, you can do both photo and video with it, and I've kind of talked a little bit about some of its capabilities already. So again, you can record in 4K up to 60 frames per second on this camera body, which is huge. Like, I love that. This is also huge. You can also record over 30 minutes as long as the camera body doesn't overheat, which I'll be talking about, the issues of this camera body with potential overheating in a little bit. I'll get to that. That's a whole section. The Canon 5D Mark IV, you couldn't record over 30 minutes. You couldn't go over it, but this camera body has been made to it can record over 30 minutes. Again, as long as they don't overheat, but I'll go over that in a little bit. Number four is versatility of this camera body. So the Canon R6 Mark II is really amazing. I think it's great for both photo and video. So in my opinion, it's very versatile. The only thing that you might not be able to use it for that could, decrease its versatility is if you want to take an image and you want to blow it up like so huge. Like I'm talking like mural size. Like you can't, I don't think I'd suggest printing over a 20 by 30 like canvas print from this camera body. However, I do think at some point I'm going to make a video on how big you can actually print things from the 24.2 megapixel count, because I am curious to see how big you can safely print stuff without losing like the image quality in the photograph. So when I do make a video on that, I will link it above. Number 5 is reliability. So for photography, it's really reliable. Like, it's been amazing so far, just really great autofocus. The only issue it can have is that there's kind of this glitch, and I'm gonna call it the battery shut-off problem. And I think it's probably like maybe like a firmware, something just needs updating. And I think it's because this camera body is newer. And so like, you know, Canon is still trying to like update things and fix glitches and things like that. So I think that's why it's happening. But sometimes your camera, it's right here. Sometimes the camera body will just randomly like the screen will go black. It'll just like shut off and just like stop working like for no reason, like in the middle of something random. And the only way to fix this is turn the camera body off and then take out the battery and just pop it right back in and turn it back on, and it works fine again. So basically there's something happening, like some glitch where like battery is not properly connected to the camera, and so you have to like take it out and put it back in. Like, it's just like some glitch, and I'm not entirely sure what's happening with it, but that's the only thing that you have to be careful with. So for photography, it's not really that huge of a problem. You basically just need to make sure you have 2 camera bodies on you at all times, like with lenses on them, so that, you know, for instance, the bride's walking down the aisle. If this were to happen, you could switch to your other camera body and still get some shots, you know, in the moment, because in that moment, you're not gonna have time to take the battery out and put it back in unless she's walking super slow down the aisle and it's like really long aisle, which that's happened to me before, although it is not, thankfully it's not glitched in that particular moment, which I'm very thankful for. Just to prevent, you know, this happening for photographers, basically just make sure you always have 2 camera bodies on you that could be used at all times, so that if it glitches and if it's a moment where you can't take the battery out right away, you switch to your other camera body and you should be fine. Now, if you're just doing like portraits or something, you know, that you can take 2 seconds off, you can fix it pretty easily and it's fine. For videographers, this is the one thing about this camera body that makes me not trust it for video production very much, especially in like really important moments. Because let's say you are filming the bride walking down the aisle and you only have like 1 video camera getting that angle of 1 video, you know, with your camera body, and then it glitches, and the only way to fix it is taking the battery out. But if it's on a gimbal or a Ronin, you can't get the battery out easily, and so you're gonna miss the shot. That's the one reason why I do not trust this camera body for like filming important moments like that. We normally still use the Canon 5D Mark IV for filming things like that. You can film things on it, you just need to film things that could be repeated, or, you know, that you could take multiple shots of if it were to shut off. I've talked to some friends about this. I've tested it out a little bit too. I think it can help if you have a Canon branded battery in the Canon R6 Mark II. I think that could help it glitch less potentially. Now, thankfully, it does not glitch much. Like, I gotta be honest, like if it glitches during wedding day, it's gonna happen once. You just don't know when it's gonna happen or if it's gonna happen, so you can't control that, so you have to be careful. Sometimes it can glitch more if you're using off-brand batteries, which I tend to use a lot of off-brand batteries just because they're cheaper. And I must have like 8 or 9 batteries or something like that. So Canon batteries are like $50 versus these off-brand batteries are like 2 batteries for like $25 or something. So sometimes I'll specifically make sure I have a Canon battery in this camera body just to help make sure it doesn't glitch. But again, I think it's actually glitched with that Canon branded battery in it before. I still don't 100% trust it. So I'm hoping that at some point I can upgrade the firmware to actually fix the problem long term. And when I do that, I'll make a video up here showing how to fix this problem. I'm sure at some point Canon will figure it out and it'll be fine. Number 6 is the pros and cons of the Canon R6 Mark II. So another con of it is that it can overheat when video recording. And let me go into a little more detail on this. I did some research on it because I really wanted to understand like why this happens. So basically, this is kind of how it works. So the Canon R6 Mark II could overheat if you're recording in full HD at 179 frames per second, basically. But I'm gonna be honest, who records at 179 frames per second? That's just weird. So full HD, 179 frames per second. You can record for 60 minutes or longer, but that's when it might overheat, like past 60 minutes. Gonna be honest, if you're filming in full HD and 60 frames per second, you're probably gonna be fine. Like, I really don't think that it's gonna overheat because according to this, it doesn't say it's gonna overheat. Now, it could also, like, again, if you're outside and it's super hot, it might overheat faster. Interestingly enough, so when you're filming in 4K 29.97 frames per second, it's not limited by heat. So that means that it's probably not gonna overheat. So 4K 29.97, probably not gonna be a problem. So the Canon R6 Mark IV is not going to be limited by heat, which means probably not gonna overheat if you're filming in 4K 29.97 frames per second without crop. That's important. I'll write all the things up there for you. And then if you're recording for 50 minutes or longer in 4K 59.94 frames per second with the crop, it could overheat 50 minutes or longer. If that makes sense. And then if you're recording in 4K 59.94 frames per second, which again is like 60 frames per second without the crop, it can go for 40 minutes or longer. Take that into consideration when you are filming to make sure that the camera body doesn't overheat in important moments. The other con of the Canon R6 Mark II is that it has the battery glitch, which I've already kind of gone into in depth, so I'm not going to talk about that again, but just wanted to mention that is kind of con, but I think at some point it probably will get fixed, and I bet the overheating will probably get fixed at some point too. It's just going to take time. My favorite pro of this camera body is that it has 2 SD card slot holders. Like, it has 2 SD card slots, it doesn't have a CFast card slot, doesn't have a CF card slot. I really love 2 SD card in my camera all the time because they're cheaper. I just like them like a lot. And so that's definitely a huge pro for this camera body, and also the autofocus is a huge pro of this camera body. And I'd also say the price is a huge pro of the camera body. It is not nearly as expensive as other camera bodies, but it's still a professional mirrorless camera body, which is really great. I just want to take a little commercial break and thank you for being here. My name is Jennifer Cook, and we make videos to help you learn about more things photography. We make a lot of tech reviews, we make a lot of videos about like business stuff, things like that. And so we just want to thank you for being here, and also like this video if you've liked this, watching this video so far, and then please subscribe to our channel if you want to continue seeing more content, more videos like this. It really helps to support us, and also helps to like show us that you like this content and you want more. And then comment what you thought of this video. We try to respond to as many comments as we can, and we also want to hear about what you want. So like if there's something you want me to make a video about, put in the comments. That way I can really see like what you're interested in seeing more about, so I can make that happen for you. So I know you are anxiously waiting to hear the rest about the Canon R6 Mark II. So we're going to jump right back into this video. Number 7 is, what is the cost of the Canon R6 Mark II? So on Canon, it's listed for $1,999, and I think it's actually like $400 or $500 off right now. Like, there's been like a sale for a while, and it's so interesting. So if you want that, it's basically $2,000. And on Amazon, you can also get it new for basically $2,000. Again, it's like $500 off right now, which is super cool. You can also get a renewed version of this camera body through Amazon for $1,894, so basically $1,900, basically like $100 off the new price. So you can kind of just think about, you know, like what you want to get and all different things, and keep in mind that you'll probably have to pay tax and everything. But overall, I feel like this camera body is very good for the price you're paying. Like, it's really amazing. Number 8 is how I bought this camera body. So I bought this camera body using an Amazon interest-free payment plan. And so again, I think I got like the renewed camera body off of Amazon. So I highly recommend that to anyone who is like, oh my gosh, like I really want this camera body. And I'll be sure to leave some links in the description of this video to like some new versions versus renewed versions of this camera body, so that you can go check it out for yourself. Number 9 is, how long have I had this camera body? I've had this camera body for about 9 months, I believe. I believe I got it last November, and now we're in July, so it might be 8 months. Close enough. But I've been using this camera body through like, I've used it for a lot of weddings this year and a whole lot of sessions, a lot of filming, a lot of, you know, different things we've been doing. And so I feel like I've had time to kind of like, you know, learn what it can do, you know, and test it out. So I just wanted to share my experience using it with you. Number 10 is image quality and performance. So it has great focusing performance. That's like what so many photographers are talking about for so long. They're like, the autofocus is amazing, it has so many different things, like has like touch to focus and all these things. And funny enough, I haven't really tested out the touch to focus because it's just not how I focus. Like, so basically I think that what that is people like, you can like touch to drag and like change where your focus is on the screen, I'm pretty sure. But that's for people who are like placing their focus somewhere on the screen and then looking through like this. I actually don't shoot like that. I actually shoot with a touchscreen where like I'm constantly just using the touchscreen. Like, I don't even look through the viewfinder, which is hilarious. I haven't really tested out the touch to drag. I think it does take some time, but if I ever do test it out, I'll put a video up here talking about touch to drag if I ever get to doing that. But for me, I like the touchscreen. I like using that. I like being able to control like exactly where it is, and it's great. Overall, image quality is very good. The megapixel count is just lower than I want it to be. Again, it's 24.2 megapixels. Overall, I haven't really seen an issue like when printing, but I'm also going to test out printing like, you know, an image from this camera body to see what, you know, like see how large I can print it and have it retain its quality. But overall, I love how fast this thing focuses and how fast it can take photos. I think that's a really huge perk of it, and definitely something that I like wouldn't change about the camera body, and something like I also feel that when I'm looking like at the screen, I feel like the image quality is clearer than when I'm looking at the Canon 5D Mark IV. And sometimes I feel like the image quality is just clearer like on this camera, which I think is really cool. Number 11 is absolutely fascinating, and it's how to check the shutter count of the Canon R6 Mark II. So I'm gonna actually make a separate video talking about how to actually check this and figure that out. When I do that, that'll be linked up here and in the description of this video for you to go learn and figure out how to check the shutter count on this camera body. It actually has a shutter count life expectancy recency of 300,000, which is actually double that of the Canon 5D Mark IV. And that's what I think is fascinating, because I just learned that literally 2 seconds ago. I think that's really cool that it has such a high shutter count. And I'm going to talk more about that when I make the shutter video, because I feel like I need to learn more about that before I talk more fully about it. Number 12 is how to adjust the white balance on the Canon R6 Mark II. So honestly, you can go into settings and you can adjust the white balance. It's honestly not hard to do, but what I am going to do is I'm going to make a tutorial on adjusting the white balance on this camera body. And when I do, I'm going to link it up here and put in the description of this video. That way, you know, like if you do want to how to quickly adjust the white balance, like custom Kelvin white balance, you can go and see that video for yourself. Number 13 is what is my favorite thing about the Canon R6 Mark II. So my favorite thing about the Canon R6 Mark II is that I love the autofocus capabilities, and I love how fast it is, and I love the image quality. I think it's really, really great. It's also very lightweight, so it's easier to handle on a wedding day, and I really like that aspect about it too. And I'll pop up a few images on it just so you can like see how this thing shoots, and I think it's great. Number 14 is one of my overall thoughts on the Canon R6 Mark II. So I love the weight, I love how the pictures look, and I love how the autofocus works. I don't love how that the megapixel count was lower than the Canon 5D Mark IV, but I also feel like it hasn't been like a huge issue yet, so I'm not really going to worry about it. It's just something that I don't love as much. To be honest, higher megapixel really only matters if you really want to print your images like super large. Like I'm talking like 20 by 30 or larger, and I find that, you know, only sometimes people print them that large. And I'd say that if my brides actually wanted to print it that large and like I knew about it, I might even like make sure that certain images were exported larger. Like I might make some extra tweaks, you know, like there's some ways I can kind of make things larger in post a little bit. And so like if a bride wants to, if they want to print it bigger, like as a canvas wallet, which if they're doing that, I will probably know about it. I will make sure that their images are going to be as high resolution as possible, which I try to do that anyways. But sometimes if they're going to print it really large, I just want to make sure that that image is going to work good for them. Number 15 is the Canon R6 Mark II versus the Canon 5D Mark IV. Which one should I buy? This is actually going to be one of the next videos that comes up, because I feel like I need to create a video to compare these two camera bodies, because I feel like now that I've made, you know, like a review video off each of these camera bodies, there needs to be a video that just talks about like, hey, this one does this, comparing them side by side. It's kind of what I want to do. So I'm going to make a video on that. That way you can really figure out which one you want to buy. And of course, you can watch this video fully. You can watch the Canon 5D Mark IV video fully to really like do your research and see which one you want to buy for your photography business. However, I'm also going to make a video in which I'm comparing these two camera bodies. So if you are interested in comparing the Canon 5D Mark IV and the Canon R6 Mark II side by side, that video is going to be next.